Funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you. Tonight, Clive James continues his look at the elusive and unpredictable nature of fame in the 20th century as he examines the magic box. Television brings success to the slapstick antics of Lucille Ball.
First offering this evening, stop that now, go back and sit down.
And television transforms a piano player into a major personality. Hollywood responds with giant screens and steamier sex. It's the age of Bardot and Monroe.
I wanna be loved by you, the deedly 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 dum, boop boopy doop.
Hugh Hefner unveils Playboy. Marlon Brando and James Dean rebel. And a young singer shocks parents by taking this rebellion to the limit. A new first family reinvents Camelot and redefines glamour. Then, the young president and Martin Luther King are cut down by assassins whose violence clears a path to their own notoriety.
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
Burton and Taylor upstage Antony and Cleopatra. And the Beatles make waves on both sides of the Atlantic. With pop comes protest, and a procession of gurus and visionaries from the Maharishi to Mao are in fashion. The 60s explode tonight on Clive James' Fame in the 20th Century.
After World War II, there were only two nations left that were still powerful, and only one of those was rich. America switched its huge production capacity from weapons to household appliances. One of the most revolutionary of these stood in the corner of the living room and at the touch of a button produced a new kind of famous face.
Are you tired, run down, listless? Do you poop out at parties? Are you unpopular? The answer to all your problems is in this little bottle.
Lucille Ball had been only a minor movie star. She wasn't remote or mysterious enough to make people dream, but television favored the familiar and the cozy.
Vitamin contains vitamins, meat, vegetables, and minerals. Yes, with Vitamin you can spoon your way to health.
Lucy was the first major star of the new medium because she made people feel comfortable. Lots of people. 35 million of them in America alone.
It's so tasty, too.
She was part of the furniture, a delightful featherhead who didn't challenge her audience to do anything except stop laughing. In America, Lucy reruns went on forever, and the same thing happened in other countries as they opened up their television systems, until eventually Lucy was on screen somewhere in the world every minute of the day, always.
Our first offering this evening, stop that now, go back and sit down.
Lucy became so powerful, she bought a movie studio, RKO. This was fame on a new scale. It wasn't employed, it did the employing. No movie star had power like that.
William Holden behind me?
When William Holden came on the show as a guest, the off-screen Lucy could have bought and sold him 10 times. The on-screen Lucy pretended to be in awe of him.
He's dreamy. Ricky, this is it.
When she had a baby, it was written into the episode. Lucy was giving her fellow Americans a new kind of star they could live with, who lived with them. But her mind was written out. American TV seemed to be assuming that the mass audience couldn't take anything too complicated. They wanted it simple. They wanted it simple-minded. Liberace left Lucy looking butch, but from the business angle, he was just as hard-headed. Behind the cascade of notes he conjured from the keyboard was the background thump of an enormous cash register. In New York, his TV show was on the air 10 times a week. Millions of mothers out there wanted a son like him. Out of the ground came the cries of protest of classical composers as they spun in their graves. But Liberace couldn't have cared less, because television had joined him to a previously untapped audience of untold millions of people for whom kitsch was a step up. When he was called a vulgarian, he delivered one of the most famous lines of the century. "I cried all the way to the bank." The road to Las Vegas and the world was open. The future stretched ahead, glittering with sequins. It was a kind of majesty. Britain's new Queen Elizabeth II topped him, but only just. She was crowned in the same year as Liberace's first show, but in rather more dignified circumstances. Chosen by birth, she was going to be famous whatever she did, but a lot would depend on how she did it. The coronation went off swimmingly, watched on television by a whole new audience who had bought a set just for the purpose. Television had achieved its breakthrough in Britain in a dignified manner. Intimate, but not too intimate. A little corner of everyone's living room had become Westminster Abbey for the afternoon. Arriving at the summit of Everest at roughly the same time as the crown arrived on the Queen's bare head, Sherpa Tenzing and Edmund Hillary gave her the mountain as a present. Sherpa Tenzing became the only world-famous Nepalese outside Nepal. Hillary got a knighthood and the title of most famous New Zealander since Rutherford split the atom. Roger Bannister ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Plenty of other athletes ran it faster later, but nobody else ran it that fast first.
With 250 yards to go, 25-year-old Bannister took the lead with an amazing burst of speed.
Continental countries didn't have miles, so his achievement meant nothing there. But the Americans had miles.
What an achievement for Bannister and Britain.
A Briton had done it before an American, and television helped to bring the nation the news. Back in power for the last time near the end of a long and fruitful life, Sir Winston Churchill was persuaded to try out how he would go over on TV.
I've come here not to talk to you, and certainly not to enable you to spread the tale all over the place, but just to enable me to see what are the conditions under which this thing they call TV is going to make its way in the world. I'm sorry, I must admit to have to descend to this level, but we all have to keep pace with modern improvement, and it's just as well to see where you are in regard to it.
Though he handled it quite well, Churchill decided that TV wasn't for him. The Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States, ex-soldier Dwight D. Eisenhower, had learned to wave at people without saluting them. But it took a lot of persuasion to get him into a television studio for one of the newfangled political commercials.
You know what things cost today. High prices are just driving me crazy.
Yes, my Mamie gets after me about the high cost of living. It's another reason why I say it's time for a change.
Eisenhower beat the Democrats because he had previously beaten the Germans. not because he was a great TV performer. What TV could do for the man with the right knack for instant sincerity was shown by his running mate, Richard Nixon, who defended himself against charges of bribery with a speech calculated to touch the heart after a reassuring squeeze of the knee.
We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our two youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep him.
Dogs watching at home howled their derision, but an alarmingly large number of people were convinced. Alarm turned to desperation when Senator Joseph McCarthy exploited the new media opportunities to turn his House Committee on Un-American Activities into a witch hunt.
The little fellow who will sell his country for 30 pieces of silver, he is not the most dangerous man. It's those men in the top level of our government and in the second echelon who do the planning and the shaping of our foreign policy. They're the dangerous men, whether they're getting 30 pieces of silver or not.
Solid citizens knew that the real answer to communism was democracy and that anti-communism was a patent medicine, but they were afraid to say so. McCarthy's success scared America, and a scared America scared the world. McCarthy was so big, he was an ism. McCarthyism fed on the famous names it lured into its committee rooms. Accused of leftist sympathies, Charles Chaplin had no answer except that it was his constitutional right. 40 years before, Chaplin had come to America to breathe free air. Now he was leaving it for the same reason. For the media, it was a bigger story than any of his recent movies. A great man had found America uninhabitable. Paul Robeson was a singer, actor, linguist, star athlete, and all-round genius on the same scale as Chaplin. If he couldn't cure white Americans of racism, who could? When he found that he couldn't, he decided that the communist countries had something to teach America about democracy. The communist countries were delighted to hear this and gave him a well-organized reception. In the Soviet Union, the leadership was slow to let any of its own citizens share the fame, but a visiting famous person lent prestige. Back in America, Robeson had his passport withdrawn. The great man was a prisoner in his own country.
And rather absurd that the Soviet farmers can be here in the United States, that Baptist preachers can be in Moscow and farmers, that I'm not allowed to travel because of my friendship, open-spoken friendship, that's right, for the Soviet people and for the peoples of all the world.
Good evening. Tonight, See It Now devotes its entire half hour to a report on Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, told mainly...
The TV journalist Ed Murrow did a program on McCarthy that put the witchfinder on trial in his turn.
But the line between investigating and persecuting is a very fine one, and the junior senator from Wisconsin has stepped over it repeatedly.
McCarthy was finished from that night. People found the courage to challenge him in committee.
Senator McCarthy's charges and insinuations are not only false, but utterly irresponsible, and under the circumstances reveal a shocking disregard.
The camera worked for his opponents as well as it had worked for him. The center of the action had moved to television. This was the last thing that Hollywood wanted to hear. With its audience eroded by television at home, Hollywood fought back in the world market with everything it could think of. Released in the same year as The Queen was crowned, The Robe was filmed in CinemaScope, the first of many widescreen processors designed to give the public something that television couldn't. Some of them were so wide that you couldn't get out of the auditorium without getting into the movie. The Robe, though, had something else besides a screen and a script that went on forever. It had Richard Burton. Previously, he had been Britain's most famous new stage actor. Before the war, he might have been in two minds about going to Hollywood. Now, Hollywood came to him. When the Hollywood blockbuster The Pride and the Passion invaded Spain in 1956, the same year that the Russians invaded Hungary, Cary Grant, who himself originated in Britain, took a remarkable Spanish hostage. She was an Italian Spaniard, Sophia Loren. Hollywood wanted her because it was still haunted by the belief that only a foreign woman was capable of guilt-free sexuality. A well-built, healthy girl, Sophia looked as if she might give out affection as naturally as she took in pasta. America's own girls weren't like that. All except one. Marilyn Monroe was Hollywood's home-based international ballistic sex bomb. Her initial impact was purely sensual. Nothing else seemed to be going on. Her every wiggle and pout seemed designed to attract men.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
The impact was doubled by her air of innocence, as if she might not quite realize what this instinctive mating display could lead to.
Say.
I figured it just isn't right to drink champagne in matador pants. Would you mind fastening my straps in the back?
The foreign women looked as if they were thinking about sex. Monroe looked as if sex was something that might easily happen to her while she was thinking about something else. To call her vulnerable was a nice way of saying that she acted dumb. The studio made sure she had plenty of cleverly crafted dumb things to say.
This is what they call classical music, isn't it?
Yes.
I could tell because there's no vocal.
She did her best to make her private life a good story.
Now, a romance that has thrilled millions. The marriage of beautiful Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio.
Her marriage to a baseball hero would have been made in heaven if God was a press agent. His toughness, her tenderness.
Both bride and groom are very bright stars in their own
The story got better still when the marriage fell apart. One of the reasons it did so was media pressure, but the media didn't let up. Even bigger news than Monroe making it was Monroe blowing it, because the audience got a chance to cluck knowingly. The girl who had found success was in search of herself. She needed protection. Her next protector was Arthur Miller, America's most important playwright. Encouraged by Miller, Monroe started taking herself seriously as an actress.
It's not that I object to doing musicals or comedies. In fact, I rather enjoy it. But I would like to do also dramatic parts, too.
Actually, there was no reason why she should ever have taken herself any other way except seriously. Talent wasn't what she was short of. It was self-esteem. She was hell to live with and a hell to work with, and that became the Monroe story, even while she was at her most angelic on screen. Hollywood, she was worth the trouble. Television couldn't give you Marilyn Monroe. From any angle, she wasn't Lucy. Other countries tried to grow their own Marilyn Monroes with varying success. France had the best try in the enticing form of Brigitte Bardot. Bardot looked even more provocative than Monroe, and she also looked as if she knew what she was provoking. She drove older men mad by pouting at them, while giving young men what they weren't ready to appreciate. Her only drawback in the world-famed stakes was that she pouted mainly in French. In broken English, she could barely purse her lips, but at least that made it harder for the Americans to steal her.
I have a little black spaniel cocker.
Any other animals?
Oh, for my birthday, 1 month ago, a friend of me gave to me a little monkey. It was very, very funny, and I was very surprised when I saw the monkey. And it was impossible for me to keep it at home because he was doing pee-pee all the time.
Speaking their own language, the French still had their own thing going. The British were stuck with the same language the Americans spoke and a booming TV industry that left their movies looking for a big national subject. They found it in the heroic past. Only now, 10 years too late, did the British war hero emerge in his full mythical glory. The film was The Dam Busters, and the ace bomber pilot was Richard Todd as Wing Commander Guy Gibson. During the war, the real Guy Gibson had been as famous as a bomber pilot was allowed to get at a time when all the other bomber pilots were expected to die unsung. For Gibson to become a national hero, the war had to be already won, and his countrymen had to be in search of a winner. Thus, Guy Gibson was reborn in the form of Richard Todd, talking to the chaps man to man.
Well, here we are all together for the first time. You're wondering what it's all about, and I can't tell you because I don't know myself. But I do know it's a big thing. And if it comes off, it'll have results that may do quite a bit to shorten this war. Discipline is going to be essential.
So Guy Gibson became Richard Todd, and Richard Todd got stuck with being Guy Gibson.
Rumors are flying about already, but you've got to keep your mouth shut.
The same thing happened to the most famous Battle of Britain fighter pilot. In the heyday of the few, Douglas Bader won what headlines he was allowed to have because he was fighting the double challenge of the Luftwaffe and his missing legs. Now he found a third challenge, Kenneth More's energetic acting, as the hero talked to the chaps man to man.
Yep, got a 109 just south of Dunkirk. Smashed his tail up, cut it off like a knife.
I saw that one, Douglas. You fixed him before I had a chance.
Oh, everyone back?
All of ours are, but the CO of 19 squadron's missing.
What, Johnny Sanderson?
So Douglas Bader became Kenneth More, and Kenneth More got stuck with being Douglas Bader.
Poor old John.
Driven back on itself by Hollywood's international dominance, British films were looking very local. It was against long odds that they produced their one unarguably great star, famous in every country where English was spoken without an American accent. But not even Alec Guinness could undo the facts of economics. Finally, Hollywood conquered even him, although he made it look as though he had conquered Hollywood.
But we are facing a crisis. And for those of you who feel up to it, how about lending the others a hand, eh? Fetch and carry, a spot of paint here and there. What do you say?
Yes.
Good show.
Everyone in the British Empire that was now turning into the British Commonwealth assumed that Alec Guinness was the star of Bridge on the River Kwai. But he wasn't. William Holden had top billing.
Interesting find. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't quite follow you.
Britain's most famous film star won his world fame as a supporting actor to an all-American hero.
That's just my point. Here, there is no civilization.
Then we have the opportunity to introduce it.
The most famous film director in the world was British, but he had moved to Hollywood before the war and made his name as an international Englishman with his own empire. His name was Alfred Hitchcock, and apart from Cecil B. DeMille, he was the only director whose name the general public could recognize. Right from the start, he made brief personal appearances in all of his films. He made his leading ladies famous just by choosing them. He liked to think that he created them. But one of them created herself. Grace Kelly, finally and forever cured Hollywood of its inferiority complex about European sophistication. She was the cut-glass, ice-cool princess with fires raging beneath.
Only thing in the world you can't resist.
The darling of a wealthy Philadelphia family, born with a whole silver dinner service in her mouth, she had class to burn. She seemed to have taken to acting as a not entirely unboring alternative to just standing around being worshipped while her income discreetly piled up somewhere in the background.
Ever had a better offer in your whole life? One with everything.
I've never had a crazier one.
Just as long as you're satisfied.
You know as well as I do, this necklace is imitation.
Well, I'm not.
The millions of us that she jilted were bound to admit that Prince Rainier of Monaco had what it took to win the prize. Selected photo magazines were graciously granted the right to run spreads about the happy couple, a new step in fame management. On the eve of her departure for Monaco, there was a press conference that turned into an ordeal by fame. Hollywood had given her protection. Monaco would do that too. On her way from one fortress to another, for a moment she was caught in the open between kingdoms. For the only time in her life, she looked out of her depth. Even Hollywood stardom was small time compared to being a proper European-style princess. Rainier's little amusement park of a principality acquired a big draw for its casino, and the new princess a role she could grow old in. It was the perfect conquest, in which the conquered embraces the conqueror. But it would never have happened without her fame, and only American fame was powerful enough to work the trick. Except in those countries whose borders were lined with barbed wire, the world was turning into an American playground. Enter the American Playboy.
My name is Hugh Hefner. I'm 35 years of age, and I'm editor-publisher of Playboy magazine. I started with a personal investment of $600. In 8 years, I've built an empire worth $20 million.
Hefner's Playboy magazine was dedicated to the principle that the libido of the ordinary American male should be set free. It sounded like a bombastic sales pitch for the usual kind of skin mag with a budget so low it couldn't afford to airbrush the razor nicks off the nudes. But Hefner had cleverly decorated the gatefold of the first issue with the very woman the American male had already drooled over in the movies when she had scarcely anything on. It was Marilyn Monroe, and this time she had nothing on at all. Hefner became a publishing tycoon overnight. But he wasn't just a publisher, he was a philosopher.
Genius is a kind of a funny word. I suppose by definition I consider myself one. Maybe both intellectually and in terms of creativity. I do the things that I enjoy doing.
At his Playboy mansion in Chicago, he lived at night, in conditions which looked like a Roman orgy restaged by Walt Disney. Old-style foreign playboys such as King Farouk of Egypt or Ali Khan of everywhere were well-born wastrels. Hefner gave dissipation mass-market appeal by sanitizing it. He promoted self-indulgence as a form of self-discipline, like bodybuilding. It was a crusade. The Playboy philosophy drew much of its power from what it was reacting against.
We'll be home tonight by the light of the silvery moon, and my heart's a-thumping like a mandolin a-plucking a tune. When I get home, I'm fixing to stay. So whip, crack away, whip, crack away, whip, crack away.
Doris Day was still a bigger star than Marilyn Monroe.
I shout it from the highest hills.
She was energetic and wholesome. It was a deadly combination, which left a man nothing to do except contemplate marriage, usually the one he already had.
My heart's an open door, and my secret love's no secret.
Her cheerful smile was the kind of thing a playboy would buy a yacht to avoid. Aristotle Onassis pursued pleasure with Hefner-like dedication. He had built his fortune as a war profiteer, renting out rusty cargo ships flying dubious flags. But nobody cared about how he had made his money because he was so spectacular about the way he spent it. He was a shady character who loved the limelight. He drew famous people into his orbit by offering hospitality too lavish to resist. Winston Churchill had saved civilization. Onassis had only hustled a few billion fast drachma. Whether fame was deserved or not was ceasing to matter. Fame was a form of instant intimacy. Onassis could proudly boast that within a few minutes of meeting her, he went to bed with Eva Peron. Eva Peron came to fame as the wife of the most famous man in Argentina, Juan Peron, whose neo-fascist regime was found so congenial by Nazi war criminals on the run that they settled down there and learned Spanish. On the international scene, Evita's fame exceeded her husband's. The press didn't care that the money for her couture clothes had been earned by the sweat of the peasants she claimed to represent. What counted was her vitality, her glamour, and her easily told story as a woman of the people who had risen to world conquest. Playgirl Evita toured Europe and laid them in the aisles. Fast cars were part of the Playboy pattern. Motor racing had always attracted aristocrats with time on their hands, but now the gentlemen were outstripped for glamour by the players. Juan Manuel Fangio was a dirt track racer from Argentina who emerged as a hero, 5 times Formula One champion of the world. Women unimpressed by their husbands' driving said, "Who do you think you are, Fangio?" In Britain, they said, "Who do you think you are, Sterling Moss?" He was handsome, he wowed the girls, he was a driver for the export drive, Britain's knight in a white helmet.
Setting up a commanding lead, Moss came in to take on 10 gallons of fuel and a bottle of pop in 27 seconds. Some going. Then back for those final laps and a place in motor racing history.
He was patriotic, but really he lived in 2 countries. One of them was the fame country, and it was everywhere.
The Ferraris and the Maseratis trailing behind, Sterling Moss and the Van Wall came home alone. Victory.
Picasso was another great one for the high life. People struggling for justice all over the world had his support as long as he didn't have to struggle with them. He loved being famous. Pundits serious about painting might carp about his weakness for publicity, but his supporters had an answer. He was the genius, so his paintings were automatically serious. But he was also serious about money. Fame increased his market and put up his prices. Every American multimillionaire had to have a Picasso, even if it was only a piece of pottery. Soon Picasso was a multimillionaire too. If he had any trouble reconciling this with his pro-communist opinions, living in the south of France allayed the pangs. He had always claimed the great artist's right to live by his own rules. Now he treated art like a business, while the world's media treated everything he touched as art. Hardly anyone could tell a real Picasso from a fake, but it didn't matter because the real Picasso was Picasso himself.
And if they put you in a hole, don't yell. Don't make a sound. You'll still be yelling when they come to take you out.
Frank Sinatra's career had been in a hole, but from here to eternity put him back on top.
And be quiet.
Angelo Maggio's death scene was the moment of birth for the new Sinatra. Sinatra came back as a singer, too.
If they ask me, I could write a book.
A string of hit albums in the new LP format made him the voice of wistful men everywhere who liked to believe that if they could just tell the girl how lonely they were, they wouldn't be.
Preface on how we met, so the world would never forget.
But beyond his restored success as an actor and singer, there was his entirely new eminence as an international icon who was just Sinatra. His life took over as the main part of the story. Sinatra showed up all over the place with beautiful women, to some of whom he was married. When the press got nosy, he got heavy. Swinging lover stories made headlines. Sinatra hobnobs with the mob stories made more headlines. Sinatra just didn't seem to care about keeping his image smooth at the edges. He was too impatient to fool around with PR.
She gets far too hungry to wait for dinner at 8. She adores the theater.
In the movies, they had to get his performance on take 1. He wasn't patient enough to stick around for take 2. If he had been, he could have been the biggest star in Hollywood. But except when he sang, he wouldn't dance for more than 4 bars to anyone else's tune. He wasn't interested in being someone else. He was himself. He was his own man.
She will never go up to Harlem, dressed in ermine and pearls. Won't dish the dirt with all the other girls. That is why the lady is a tramp.
The message he sent to the world was that it wasn't what you did, it was how you did it. It was the way you were, or if you weren't him, the way you wished you were. Hip with a flip lip, no sweat. Think sad, but say it funny. Getting the girl without trying.
It's California, 'cause it's so cold and so damp. That's why the lady, that's why the lady, that's why the lady is a tramp.
Now, that's how I'm going to clear the table. Don't you ever talk that way to me.
The new Hollywood film star who really cared about acting was Marlon Brando, even though he spoke English as if it were a foreign language he had acquired by sleep teaching from a gramophone record running at the wrong speed.
Who do you think you are, a pair of queens? Just remember what Huey Long said, that every man's a king, and I'm the king around here. And don't you forget it. My place is all cleared up now. You want me to clear yours?
His initial impact made all previous film stars, even the most realistic like Sinatra, look as if they had been just saying their lines. Brando conveyed what was behind the lines. He conveyed emotion, whole complexes of emotions, bottomless wells of psychic disturbance. Brando was the brooding outcast with the beautiful face.
So,
Hey, Stella! You put that howling down there and go to bed.
Yes, I want my girls down here.
You shut up. You're gonna get the law.
Hey,
you
Stella!
Get your feet on a woman and then call her back, because she ain't gonna come. You're gonna have a...
He was a social explosion, a brilliantly timed belch. Only the movies could handle it. Television wouldn't have stood for it. People would have kept adjusting the set.
Hey, Stella!
Brando managed to behave at his first Oscar ceremony, but he didn't like Hollywood hype. For the moment, he was prepared to jump through hoops, but he hated himself for pretending to be pleased. If he had to show up at the premiere to push a movie, he might smile at the time, but he felt manipulated afterwards.
Luck be a lady tonight. Luck be a lady tonight. Luck, if you've ever been a lady to begin with. Luck be a lady tonight.
His frustration was compounded by his lack of control over the movies he made. He could turn them down, but he couldn't set them up. No actor was that powerful. He had to play those big, straight, starring roles. He proved that he could play them better than a brooding outcast might be expected to do. But a brooding outcast, he always remained. Whatever he was up to on screen, the real drama was Brando versus Hollywood, Brando versus America, Brando versus the world.
Stick with me, baby. I'm the fella you came in with. Luck be a lady. Luck be a lady. Luck be a lady tonight.
The rebel without a cause was James Dean, and he was such a brooding outcast, he made Brando look like Danny Kaye.
Is that why you moved from the last town? Because you're in trouble?
No, they think that they can protect me by moving around all the time.
You had a good start in the wrong direction back there. Why'd you do it?
What do you mean? Mess a kid up?
Yeah.
Actually, Dean had started off in television with a capacity to deliver a line as written, just like an ordinary actor.
Surely we did not spend 3 years following the master to return again to our nets. Was it for this the master sent us out to cure the sick, cast out devils?
But Dean was an extraordinary actor, and Hollywood knew it. He was given the mixed-up kid roles because the teenagers in the drive-ins wanted to see one of their own kind who dared to defy all those ridiculous grown-up inhibitions, such as bringing Dad's car home safely instead of aiming it off a cliff.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Gig. We asked Jimmy over today because he's a racing man himself. A real one, not a crazy one.
Somebody decided that Dean was the ideal person to give teenagers advice on safe driving.
We probably have a great many young people watching our show tonight, and for their benefit, I'd like your opinion about fast driving on the highway.
Now I drive on the highways, I'm extra cautious. Because no one knows what they're doing. Half the time, you don't know what this guy's going to do with that one. I find myself being very cautious on the highway.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine.
Dean's qualifications to give advice on road safety were the same as a lemming's to give advice on cliff walking. But his timing was immaculate. The car crash stopped his body, but his fame kept going. Free to fly into an unencumbered future where lonely young people would always pin his picture to the wall, their own angel. The young got their own music with Bill Haley and the Comets. Bill Haley wasn't young himself, if you look closely, but the audience was dancing too hard to keep him in focus. After decades on the road, Haley was stunned to have suddenly got so far. His fame was abrupt and limited. All he could do was rock around the clock again. The way was open for someone who actually looked the way the music made you feel.
Well, you may go to college, you may go to school, you may have a pink Cadillac, but don't you be nobody's fool. Now, baby, come back, baby, come back.
Elvis Presley came out of the South like an answer to a record executive's dream.
Well, listen, let me tell you, baby, what I'm talking about. Come on back to meet the little girl so we can play.
He sang like a wild cherub playing Hooky from Heaven. He looked like a Greek god with a quiff, and every move he made said sex.
Hit it! Let's rock, let's go!
In his first few TV appearances, he put all the moves in.
You ain't nothing
Appalled at the prospect of America's youth being corrupted by Elvis's swiveling hips, the television executives panicked. By Elvis's 10th appearance, they were shooting him strictly from the waist up.
and I know I'll have you too. Don't be cruel. I don't want no other love. Baby, it's just you I'm thinking of. Don't be cruel. It's true. Don't be cruel. Too hard. It's true. Here we go. Well, I don't know what.
Crosby and Sinatra had been hampered in their global reach by the dependence of their songs on the English language. Singing a special rock and roll dialect comprehensible only to young people who could read his upper lip, Elvis went through language barriers like a silent movie. His records were released anywhere in the world where there were young people ready to love someone their parents hated. But Elvis wanted the parents too. When his draft number came up, he went into the army without a murmur. He was a model soldier, and his army hitch was a worldwide media sensation. A teenage idol was serving his country. He was a rebel with a cause. Elvis was practically part of US foreign policy, proof that if the Russians tried anything in Europe, they wouldn't just be facing rockets. They would be up against rock singers as well. Having proved himself a solid citizen, Elvis came home to find that he had increased his young audience while winning over their parents. His movie career boomed too.
How dare you think such cheap tactics would work with me?
Not any tactics, honey. It's just the beast in me.
They might not have been the most brilliant movies in the world, but they were marketable worldwide because when Elvis had done enough talking, he sang.
Like we're sitting on a block of stone, way over in the corner weeping all alone. The warden said, hey buddy, don't you be no square. If you can't find a partner, use a wooden chair. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the old cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
It was all part of a plan for total merchandising of an asset. If Elvis had toured abroad, the results would have been even more lucrative. But they were lucrative enough. Revenue far beyond Elvis's capacity to spend. Music and movies had made a Memphis poor boy into a planetary presence as all-enveloping as the ozone layer.
Dancing to the jailhouse rock, 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 rock. 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 Dancing to the jailhouse rock.
From those forced to admit through clenched teeth that the boy could have been worse, there were sighs of relief that there was no such thing as world television. But domestic television was already having the effect of turning everyone who appeared on it into a performer. Filling in for the shy Eisenhower, Vice President Nixon still lacked charm, but he made up for it with exposure. Russia's frontman Nikita Khrushchev had a big hit on television when he came to visit Hollywood. He wasn't that far from home. He was a ham too. Crushy knew that if he was going to bang his fist on the table to make a point, he'd better keep banging it until the camera got the shot. During Nixon's tour of Russia, the two performers met in a kitchen for a debate that was shown by television stations all over the world as fast as a plane could get the film there.
Everything that I say will be recorded and translated and will be carried all over the Soviet Union. That's a fair bargain.
The kitchen debate was a double act, like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Nobody remembered who said what. They only remembered that Nixon was starting to look like President Eisenhower's natural successor. On screen, politics and show business were merging. Behind the scenes, they had merged. Men with career management as a career were already working on a fascinating proposition. If Nixon was presidential material, what could be done with a man with the right war record, the right wife, the right voice, the right face?
This is Senator John Kennedy, the Democratic nominee for the office of the presidency.
Clive James' fame in the 20th century will continue in a moment.
In a time when issues and events crowd our lives and personal concerns cloud our vision, public television reminds us that our world remains a place of endless wonder. That nature's not something outside of ourselves, but a part of who we are, how we live and learn. And public television's unparalleled lineup of science and nature programs gives every American the chance to celebrate the great spectacle of life on Earth, beneath the sea, and beyond the stars.
But I think the first encounter with Jupiter really shocked a lot of people.
All we can say now is, wow, what a way to leave the solar system.
From the smallest molecule to the vastness of space, everything and every place on Earth and beyond is within your reach on public television.